Welcome to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show.
Hello and welcome back to the Less Stressed Lawyer Show with Olivia Vizachero. Olivia is a former attorney turned life and business coach for lawyers. She helps ambitious attorneys stop overthinking, set boundaries, and take bold action so they can build a practice and the life they actually love. I'm Evan Mack, and today we're talking about how lawyers can set boundaries without damaging relationships or their reputation. Miss Olivia, my dear, welcome back.
So good to see you, Evan.
Good to see you too. So, Olivia, why do so many lawyers hesitate to set boundaries even when they know they need them?
So a big part of it is about the negative emotion that they'll have to experience when they set them. So if you are going to say no or set a boundary or draw a line in the sand, let's say I'm not responding to emails after 7 p.m. or at least during dinner with my family, they will feel guilty because they think that they should respond either more quickly than they're going to, or that they should respond at a certain time. A lot of people have different beliefs about what is required in order to be like good at your job. And they'll tell themselves that being on all the time or being hyper responsive is part of that. So whenever we're thinking a should thought, it's going to trigger guilt. And then that guilt feels uncomfortable for them. So they avoid it by refusing to set the boundary, and then they people please instead. So that's a big reason that people don't set boundaries. If we're looking at other emotions that factor in here, a big one would be worry or fear that someone's going to judge them, have a negative opinion of them, that there might be some negative repercussion, and then they'll avoid that fear or that worry by doing the thing that feels a little bit safer in the moment. And then the other big contributing factor here is them telling themselves they're not allowed to or that they can't. And that will manifest in different ways. You might be thinking, I have to respond right now, or I need to respond. That's not in the negative, but it leads to the same result. So if we're thinking about what's the thinking that ultimately creates the result of us not setting a boundary, the thought's going to trigger a feeling, the feeling's going to drive an action, and then the action will produce that result. So if you're telling yourself you can't do something or you must do something, you'll feel pretty resigned, and then you won't take the intentional action like setting the boundary.
So what are lawyers usually afraid will happen if they start, saying no after setting these limits?
It depends on who you're communicating the no to, right? So if you're communicating a no to a client, and it might not even be a hard no, it might be sort of a compromise somewhere in the middle, even a not right now, or not in the time that you'd like me to do it in. It's going to take me a little bit longer. Or I can't make that argument, or that's not a route that we can take, or that I would recommend proceeding with. And communicating the no feels super scary. So they might think the client will fire them, or the client's going to leave them a negative review, or the client's just going to be mad. A lot of people don't like it when people feel mad towards them or at them. They'll think that they're going to disappoint the client, and they define their job as avoiding disappointing their clients. So if you define your role that way, then you're going to have a really hard time doing anything that takes you outside of operating within that role. Conversely, if it's, let's say, someone that you're working for, a supervisor, you might be afraid that you'd get a negative review, or that they won't want to work with you in the future. Depending on your firm dynamic and environment, you might really be in hot water if someone chooses not to work with you and it impacts your ability to hit your hours targets. Those are concerns that I see all the time. Even managing down, you might tell a subordinate or someone that you're mentoring, no, I can't look at that right now. Or no, I'm not going to let you argue this motion hearing. The client wants me to do it, or I feel more comfortable doing it. And you'll feel guilty. And you might think that people will find you hard to work with or complain about you. Or you might even just judge yourself. I'm a bad mentor. I'm a bad supervisor because the person who works for me doesn't really enjoy it. And then we also see this come up outside of work. So if you're telling your spouse no, or your kids no, what are you afraid will happen? They might be mad at you. It might impact your relationship negatively. You might deal with some passive aggressive behavior, or it ups the tension and kind of ruins the evening or the weekend, depending on the context. So those are some examples of the fears that I see people struggle with, which is why they don't take that intentional action, because they don't want that negative consequence to be something they experience.
So in what situations do these boundary issues show up most often, for lawyers in their day-to-day work?
The biggest one definitely has to be with availability. So I work with my clients all the time on planning their daily schedule. And my goal for people is for them to make a game plan the night before. You use a different part of your brain when you plan in advance versus day of. And that once that plan is set in stone, we really stick to it. Now, I teach a concept called flex time. So we build in a little wiggle room, typically in the afternoon, to say, hey, if something unexpected comes up during the day, I have some assigned time, if that makes sense, where I'm not planning to do anything else but handle or triage something that came up that I want to be on top of relatively quickly. But aside from what fits in that flex time, my typical rule of thumb is we really don't want to mess with the daily plan. So we want to get out of the cycle of responding to things and tackling something day of. I'd much rather have people say, yes, I will do this tomorrow, and I will include it in my nightly planning for planning my day tomorrow when it comes time to do that. But then stuff comes up throughout the day and they abandon the plan and they don't honor the boundaries and they jump on the urgent thing, they handle the emergency, they reshuffle their schedule, and they end up not accomplishing what they set out to accomplish, or they have to work fringe hours into the evenings or weekends in order to get caught up with where they thought they would be. So that's a big one. The other thing that I see people struggle with, still coming into play here with the time management component, but agreeing to deadlines that don't work for them. It's just a knee-jerk reaction to say yes without actually considering, do I have time available to do this in the time that I'm agreeing to complete it by? And people ignore the math. They just say yes. They don't set the boundary. And then their plan, like I said, goes out the window, and they typically drop the ball because it wasn't realistic to begin with, but they didn't focus on whether or not that was the case initially. And then just responding to people when they said that they wouldn't. And just responding to people when they said that they wouldn't. So whether that's in the evenings or on the weekends or on vacation or things like that, people really struggle setting boundaries there.
So, Miss Olivia, how do unclear or inconsistent boundaries start to affect the lawyer's schedule and maybe their workload as well?
I absolutely love this question. This is such a good one. People think that by people pleasing, I actually just had this conversation with a client yesterday. We think that by people pleasing, even some of the time, we're doing the thing that's better or good, right? That the other person will be happy and it's better than them. And it's better than them being upset 100% of the time because you're enforcing a boundary. So if they're only upset with you 50% of the time, at least they're not upset with you the other 50% of the time. But the problem there is you're teaching them that you don't honor your boundaries. And most people put the onus on the other person who's sort of on the external side of the boundary to honor it. I hear from my clients all the time, oh my God, they're not respecting my boundaries. I'm like, right. It's not their job to. It's your job to respect your own boundaries. Like, they're going to push the envelope. They're going to test it to see how serious you are. So if the boundary is, I'm not going to respond to emails after 7, and even if you tell all of your clients that, maybe you tell them in the initial meeting that that's your policy, or it's in your signature line, or you have a message that pops up after hours, you might tell yourself they shouldn't email me after 7. I've clearly explained I don't respond to emails after 7 o'clock. They're still going to email you because they want to. And that's okay. It's your job to honor it. But when we get inconsistent here, we teach them that there's wiggle room. And for anyone who's listening, if you have a child, especially like a toddler, I'm sure you have seen where the wiggle room becomes problematic because they know, like, I don't know if mom's serious about this. She might cave. She might let me stay up late and watch TV when my normal bedtime is like 7 or 8 p.m. Like, sometimes she lets me stay up till 9 and watch the show that I want to watch. So they're going to ask more and more and more because they know that there's some flexibility there. So if you struggle with that, really challenge the assumption that it's better to people please in the moment. Consistency is actually what tends to be the better course of action because people learn, like, hey, they're not messing around. And I deeply believe, I mean, this might seem like a foreign concept, but I deeply believe that people hate wasting their own time. So if they know that you're going to be unwavering about your boundary, people aren't going to spend the time to test it. They're just going to know, hey, this is how this person operates. It's not even worth trying. I know the answer is going to be no. And then you'll have a much more higher likelihood. And then you'll have a much higher likelihood that they actually do respect your boundary, but it's because you're respecting it first.
What are some common ways lawyers unintentionally train clients or colleagues to expect constant availability?
Inconsistent response time is one. So if you shoot off messages really fast some of the time, people get used to that. And we like having an itch scratched, right? So if you want an answer from someone and then you get it within a certain time frame, pretty often you'll set that as your expectation. And then when you respond differently, people might take issue with that. There's a couple different ways you can handle that. One is you can just explain like, hey, I don't promise a response time. So sometimes you'll get an instantaneous response from me and sometimes it will take me a little bit longer. You can tell people that it's okay for them to ping you more than once. That's something that I have no problem with, even though a lot of people have mind drama around like a double reach out, a double check-in or follow-up. But outside of just response times, thinking of the other ways that you might not honor a boundary, like this comes up with billing quite a bit. Do you discount sometimes? If you discount sometimes, your clients might recognize that your rates are negotiable and push back on a bill that you thought was reasonable that you didn't discount on, or you did discount it, but they push even further because they know that you're a little wishy-washy when it comes to your rates and how you charge. Same thing with going against your better judgment. If you strongly recommend something and really think it's inadvisable, but you cave to the client, obviously a client has ultimate authority and say on what the process or procedure looks like in their case. But if it's something that you're really against and you give in, they'll probably test that boundary as well in the future. So if you have some difficult clients who are like, no, we have to do it this way, and you're like, I can't, and then you do, then it weakens their trust or ability to rely on when you say you can't do something or you won't do something because you prove to them the opposite.
So, Olivia, how does people pleasing influence the way lawyers handle boundaries in real situations?
So outside of that, people pleasing keeps reinforcing those beliefs that I mentioned earlier. The I have to do this, I need to do this, I must, I can't do the thing that I'd prefer to do, I can't say no, I can't push back on the deadline, I can't tell them that I'm not going to proceed in the way that they want me to proceed. And then you never get any evidence to the contrary that you can, or that when you do set a boundary, the world doesn't stop spinning. So you're going to keep catastrophizing the outcome or the consequence of setting a boundary. The more you people please, all you do is get evidence that nothing goes wrong when I do people please. And our brain makes a false equivalency here. I'm a little bit of a math nerd, and in proof theory, it's like if A, then B. And then the equivalent logically of that is the equivalent of that in terms of logic and proof theory is if not B, then not A. And people will mix that up and they'll think just because I have people pleased and there wasn't a negative consequence, that must mean that if I don't people please, there will be a negative consequence. And that's not what is actually going on here. So we make it mean something and we form a belief around this idea of setting boundaries based on our history and track record of people pleasing and the evidence that that has created. What we haven't done is tested and created some evidence that there won't be a negative consequence if we set a boundary and that it can actually be okay to set one and the world can keep spinning. So we want to test that even in small ways. Like, okay, I cannot respond to my email during dinner hours.
Right.
Test that, create some safety. Your clients will be fine. Or this one time, I'm not going to respond at night. I'm going to wait until I get into the office at 9. Okay, were they fine? Was no one mad at you? Did they fire you? They probably didn't. Everything was okay. So you want to create as much evidence as you You want to create as much evidence as you can so you can feel more comfortable doing it in the future. And that will help dial down the worry, which will reduce your resistance to setting boundaries.
So, what tends to change in someone's workload or that day-to-day experience once they start setting and maintaining these clear boundaries you're talking about?
So, a couple different things change. Number one, your beliefs about what your career experience can be like start to shift. So you're going to start believing, wow, I actually have more control here than I think I do. I'm in control of my time. I'm in control of what I can get done and accomplish in a day. It's not outside of my hands. And that feels so much more empowering. So it's going to change the way that you feel during your workday. You're going to feel more capable, more in control, as opposed to feeling helpless or powerless and out of control. And everything changes from there. You'll also exert more control as a result of these shifted beliefs and feeling these more positive emotions. And then you'll get through the things that you planned to do. And when you get through the things that you planned to do, yes, the work gets completed, which is great, but you also get access to feeling proud and accomplished at the end of your day. And so many attorneys that I work with typically end their day feeling like they missed the mark. They didn't get done what they wanted to, so they're feeling a little inadequate, a little discouraged, frustrated with themselves. So this is really a gift you can give yourself of how do I want to feel about the job I'm doing and what I did today. Did I have a good day? If you set some boundaries and get through what you planned, you will probably feel a lot better.
So, how can someone set a boundary in a way that still comes across as professional and respectful?
So if you check in with yourself and you're getting ready to set a boundary, but you're coming from this faulty belief that they're doing something wrong, you're probably going to feel frustrated or annoyed, irritated, resentful, anything like that. And it's going to come across in the way that you communicate it. Think about any time that someone's a little miffed at you, you pick up on it. We're pretty perceptive people, especially lawyers. We're trained in issue spotting. So we pick up on a lot of small, slight nuances. So people are going to pick up on that negative energy that you're communicating from. So you want to get to what I call a cleaner place. What's the emotion that you want to feel or you would need to feel in order to communicate a boundary very calmly? And that might look like feeling accepting or understanding or grounded or trusting of yourself and possibly the other person as well. But in order to feel trusting or grounded or accepting or understanding, you need to be thinking things like they get to do whatever they want to do and I get to do whatever I want to do. I'm actually allowed to have boundaries and enforce them. If we're trying to conjure up that trust, you have to be thinking that they'll be okay. The world won't screech to a halt if I do this. I'm allowed to do this. I can still be a good attorney, a good service provider, and set this boundary. And then you communicate it from there. And you really want to be unattached to whatever their response is. So a lot of people pursue or covet what I call the false third option, which is where we only have two options and you want a combination of the best parts of both of them. So the first option is you don't set the boundary and then there's nothing for them to be upset about. Or you set the boundary and they get to have whatever emotional reaction they choose to have. That's outside of your control. Most people want the false third option, which is you set the boundary, but they have to be happy about it. You get to control their emotional response. There's no consequence. And that option isn't on the table. So you got to go back to the drawing board with the first two and pick the one that most aligns with the result that you want to create. And that can be uncomfortable for some people. But if you recognize those are the only two choices, it gets easier to pick the one that you prefer and move forward.
So if someone knows they need to set a boundary but feels uncomfortable, what can they do in that moment to follow through?
So the first thing that I think is really helpful, and this is a little bit before being in the moment, but we get really focused on what we call in coaching all or nothing thinking, that we have to 100% meet someone's expectations, even if we don't articulate it that way out loud, like consciously, subconsciously, we're thinking about that and holding ourselves to that standard. So anything that slips from that 100% alignment, we consider problematic. And instead of thinking of it that way, I have been teaching my clients to think about things in terms of what I call permissible gaps. So a really good example here would be a billable hour target that your firm has. Let's say your firm requires 1950 or 2,000 hours a year, and you're coming in at 1780 or 1820. That might impact your bonus. I'm not positive. It depends on the firm. But my clients will come to me, and every year they'll be catastrophizing and in a panic, like, oh my goodness, they're going to fire me. I'm like, all right, let's look at the data, the past data. What does the track record show? The track record shows that you've been coming in at that number on average pretty much every year. And yes, you get a talking to or a lecture every couple of months to get your hours up, but they have not fired you. They haven't threatened to fire you. You're not even on a performance plan. The world keeps spinning. So you're actually fine. And there would also be in that situation an impermissible gap. Let's say if you're coming in at 1,100 hours each year and the requirement's 2,000, maybe you're not profitable to the firm, and that does create much more of a likelihood that there will be some negative consequence. But if there isn't a negative consequence and you just keep getting those talking tos, there's what the firm expects, and then there's what you offer, and there's a little gap in between, and it's acceptable. It's a permissible gap. So if you're looking at whatever situation you want to set a boundary in, you want to be thinking of, what's the permissible gap here? What am I willing to offer? What will they be willing to accept? And even if that's not a direct match, can that be okay? And normally the answer to that question is yes. We just have to be open-minded enough in order to find it. And then in the moment, again, if you've thought about some of this stuff ahead of time, the best thing I think people can do is evaluate after the fact. Like if you people pleased and you caught yourself afterwards, get very specific. Why did you do that? And what exactly would you do in the future the next time that situation presents itself? You'll have your go-to answer at the tip of your tongue or the top of your mind when that situation reoccurs. But in the moment, if you can slow yourself down in order to not get into that knee-jerk mode, maybe you need to say to someone, let me call you right back. Let me check my calendar and I'll shoot you an email in a couple of minutes. Let me just check on one thing, even if it's not true. Just to buy yourself enough time to get out of that discomfort avoidance state of like, oh my God, I feel guilty or I feel so scared. And I just want to say the thing that's super comfortable in this moment, even though it sort of self-sabotages and doesn't set me up for success down the road. You can really give yourself some room to honor those initial decisions ahead of time if you create some space just to check in, remind yourself of what that decision is, and then figure out what you need to say to communicate it. But if you answer immediately, you'll typically do the thing that is least uncomfortable in the moment.
Good stuff, Miss Olivia. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Evan.
All right. That's it for today's episode of the Less Stressed Lawyer Show. If you're ready to stop overthinking and start making bold moves in your life and practice, visit oliviavizachero.com. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the show, and share this episode with an attorney who might need it. And we'll see you all next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.